In this recording, we're going to discuss muscle and nervous tissue. Muscle tissue is unique in that its specialized function is contraction. And we're going to use good old ATP, chemical energy. We're going to turn that into the mechanical energy of movement. The main component of muscle tissue, they're called myocytes. They're muscle cells, and they are excitable. You may or may not remember that term, but it means the ability to respond to either electrical or chemical stimulation. We have two main forms of these myocytes, and the difference really lies in the arrangement of the protein bundles, the myofilaments, within the cytoplasm of the myocytes. Our two options are striated or smooth muscle cells. If you are a striated muscle cell, you have a striped or striated appearance under the microscope, so you look like you have stripes. If you are a smooth muscle cell, you have no striations. You are not striped. You will instead have a smooth spindle-shaped appearance, and a spindle's kind of thick in the middle, and it kind of tapers off and gets thin out to the sides. In total, we have three specific types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle itself. The skeletal and cardiac muscles, those are going to be our striated muscles, while the smooth muscle is smooth and has no striations. Now, skeletal muscle cells, these are attached to your skeleton. Okay, that's how we get skeletal muscle movement. These skeletal muscles are stimulated by your nervous system, and they're under voluntary control or conscious control. So you get to decide if and when and how your skeletal muscles move, or maybe you decide they don't need to move right now. Maybe you decide you just want to sit down and relax for a little bit. That's okay too. Most skeletal muscles are long, nearly the length of the muscle itself. And we usually refer to skeletal muscle cells as muscle fibers. The muscle fibers are formed when you fuse embryonic myoblasts, and myo means muscle. So these cells, if they're going to fuse together, you are going to end up with a multinucleated cell. And so this one muscle fiber has quite a few nuclei. This one muscle fiber has quite a few nuclei. Okay. I think these look like striped straws. Okay, that's what I usually call them, striped straws. So they're long and skinny like a straw, and then you can obviously see the striations, the stripes. Okay, so that is skeletal muscle. Okay, so they're voluntary, they're multinucleated, they are striated. Now, cardiac muscle cells, we are going to see some similarities here, but some differences also. So so muscle cells are only found in your heart. That should make sense. Okay. They also have striations, so you're going to see that striped appearance. So you can see our stripes here. Okay. But there are some differences as well. First of all, cardiac muscle is involuntarily controlled. Your brain does not consciously control these contractions. In fact, your cardiac muscle cells are autorhythmic, so they can beat all by themselves. And honestly, this is a good thing. So we don't want to have to consciously think about making our heart beat all the time. Okay, so the best example is when you're asleep, you still need your heart to beat, but your conscious is asleep, and so that would be bad, right? So involuntarily controlled for your heart, that's actually a really good thing. Now, these physically look a little bit different. These cells are shorter. A lot of times they are branched, and they only have one nucleus. They're uninucleated. And so these, to me, don't really look like straws anymore. They're still striped. Okay, so the striations are still there. But what is our real true defining characteristic here? It's these other little lines. These are called intercalated discs. Okay, these are composed of gap junctions and modified tight junctions that allow the heart muscle to contract as a unit. So we need that nice rhythmic contraction. We need the top part of your heart to beat and then the bottom part of your heart to beat next. Okay, and so we've talked about the gap junctions being for rapid communication of electrical impulses, which is how your heart does in fact contract. So if we have intercalated discs, it's cardiac muscle. If we don't have intercalated discs, but it's still striped, it is skeletal muscle. Our last muscle type is smooth muscle. Okay, we are not going to see any striations in smooth muscle. We do have a common characteristic of smooth and cardiac muscle in that smooth muscle is also involuntarily controlled. Okay, so you don't have to actively think about moving blood through your vessels or moving food through your stomach. That's subconsciously controlled. Now, the shapes of the cells are quite a bit different here as well. We threw around the word spindle shaped, and I told you that meant that it was thicker in the middle and it tapers off or gets skinny out to the sides. You have a very prominent nucleus in the center of the cell as well, so that's kind of a defining characteristic. So these nuclei are not exactly in the center of these cells, and you have a ton of nuclei here, but they're not in the center of the cells. So that's kind of a distinguishing characteristic as well for smooth muscle. Most smooth muscle tissues, the plasma membranes are going to be linked by gap junctions as well, because we're going to need that rapid communication. We're going to need the muscles of your stomach to contract in a very particular way to promote peristalsis, or the moving of food through the stomach. So we want food to go down and out. Okay, we don't want some to go down but some to go up, things like that. So these gap junctions allow for that rapid communication so we can get rhythmic muscle contraction. And then we have nervous tissue. Now, you're going to like nervous tissue because it's all the same. Okay, there's no subcategories, there's no specific types of nervous tissue. It's really all composed of the same stuff. You find nervous tissue in your brain, your spinal cord, and then the nerve fibers themselves. You have two main types of cells, and then you have an extracellular matrix. Okay? Now, the nerve cells, the neurons themselves, are capable of sending and receiving messages. Your brain tells your body what to do, right? And then you have neuroglial cells, and they support neuron activities. There are multiple types of neuroglial cells, but for this recording, we're just going to group them all together. When we talk about the nervous system, we'll talk in more detail about specific types and functions of neuroglial cells. Okay, but for here, they're just collectively neuroglial cells, and they support neuron activity. Okay, and then your extracellular matrix. Okay, the ground substance, okay, the liquidy stuff, is kind of unique in that we have a special type of proteoglycan that we only find in nervous tissue, so that's kind of cool. And you're not going to see a whole lot of protein fibers. Okay, it's really just going to be a bunch of big old neurons, and then a bunch of little tiny neuroglial cells, and then just a lot of fluid. Okay, your neurons themselves, they are excitable. Okay, so they are capable of responding to chemical stimuli as well. The big thick part is the cell body, or sometimes it's called the soma, which basically means body. This is where you're going to find your nucleus. You do have organelles in neurons as well. I mean, they are fully functional cells. You usually can't see the organelles. Either the magnification isn't high enough, or the stain could be a little too dark. Okay, probably a little bit of A, a little bit of B, but there are organelles in there, pinky promise. Okay, and then you're going to have some extensions. Okay, you're going to have one axon, and you're going to have several dendrites. Now, an axon versus a dendrite visible, like which one is which, that's a little more difficult to determine without a lot of practice. Okay, this one is labeled for us, which I appreciate. Okay, this is the one axon. Okay, it tends to be all by itself. Okay, but the way this one looks, you could also make an argument, well, this one's all by itself too, Miss Davis. Why isn't this one the axon? Y'all, look, I didn't label this thing. Okay, I'm trusting whoever labeled this. But then the rest of these are the dendrites collectively. Okay, and there are different functions here. So dendrites are going to receive impulses from other cells and tissues and neurons. Okay, so information comes in through a dendrite. We move through the cell body, and that impulse is going to move out of the axon to a target cell or tissue. Okay, so that's the directionality of the nerve impulse. Okay, so we never go axon, cell body, dendrite. It's always dendrite, cell body, and then out the axon. Okay, I'm not really going to ever point to be like, hey, is this an axon or a dendrite? I'm just not going to do that. That's just mean. Okay, for our purposes at least.